Welcome to Life Science Solutions, the podcast presented by Kymanox, where we explore the challenges, innovations, and future of our industry. This episode is hosted by industry expert and Kymanox Executive Advisor, Mathias Romacker, who is thrilled to welcome an old colleague and friend, Hanns-Christian Mahler, CEO of ten23 Health. Mathias and Hanns-Christian's professional journeys intersected back in 2017 at the PDA Universe conference in Vienna, where they co-chaired discussions on prefilled syringes and injection devices. A lot has changed in the life sciences industry since then, and today they'll discuss those transformations, Hanns-Christian's journey to founding ten23 Health, and how the company is reshaping the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, and some of the most pressing trends and challenges shaping the field today. Here's Mathias.
Hanns-Christian, we know each other for quite a while. And I would say it really started, if you want, when we both were the co-chairs of the PDA Universe conference on prefilled syringes and injection devices. And I think, if I recall it correctly, it was in Austria, Vienna, in 2017. And now having the pandemic and everything, it feels like a lifetime ago. But I still wonder, if you go back a little bit in time, back in those days, and obviously before you founded your company, what do you think stood out during those days?
Well, it's great talking to you, Mathias, and I'm very happy to see you again. It's been a while. And it's an interesting reference because also the PDA universe of prefilled syringe especially, I think, keeps coming back as a theme. You know, there was just the conference a few weeks/month ago, basically in Phoenix. So it feels from a memory perspective, it feels like a little bit like a family reunion. Also thinking of 2017. I think 2017 sounds like yesterday. Which basically means that I'm an old guy. It's interesting also from the sense because I feel like things have evolved so much on the device side, but then again, also not at all. If you think about it, I think there's still a lot of topics that keep us busy from a device perspective. For over a decade now, and so that it is an interesting memory because it also feels like we're still talking about some stuff that we talked about kind of yesterday. And Vienna was a great party. I remember that.
Yeah, it was a good location. I think we all enjoyed it. I think we had this first evening in this kind of tower and overlooking Vienna and the Prater. And I think people really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's coming back this year. So it's going to be in October again in 2025. So it's a whopping 8 years later, it's going to be back in Vienna. So, reflecting on 2017, but now moving to now, you kind of covered it somewhat, but what are the most significant changes you see across our industry, broad trends? And in a certain way, I would also assume that also kind of triggered your desire to do what you're actually doing now, because you really shifted gears, Hanns-Christian.
I think when it comes to themes, I really think that devices and I would say functional containers, more focused on patient convenience, a shift towards subcutaneous administration. Things that we talked about, 5-10 years ago, I think are now starting to materialize. If you look at recent approvals, if you look at just last year's FDA approvals, there's quite an increasing trend of subcu products. Also, if you look at the biologics that were approved, etc. So it feels like the things materialize that we talked about maybe a decade ago. At the same time, it feels also like some of the challenges that were related, syringes and devices, are still around. So my saddest moment was actually when I looked at 2024 approvals for subcu products, and you see still a lot of vials being used. Well, I was thinking, why? Because there's so many device options that would be much more patient convenient. So I would say industry has come a long way. There's an evolution. We're still having a little bit of the same challenges that we discussed a while ago. And when you said I changed gears, I frankly don't feel like I ever changed gears because I've been working with sterile products since day one I started in industry. But obviously, I think I've been always enjoying to be on a learning curve from what I'm doing, with formulation and filling and having more exposure in the devices field. And I mean, being a pharmacist is being a little bit being a jack of all trades versus maybe being the expert in all the specific topics, I guess.
Yeah, let me also ask you this. I mean, obviously, we talked about the change and then maybe the non-change. I mean, one thing that strikes me a little bit as somebody's watching the market is if you would have asked me in 2017, fast forward to now, 2025, and you see all those kind of conversations we had about on-body injectors, you were really thinking that in by now we would have seen like a dozen plus launches, successful launches. But instead, it's a bumpy ride, isn't it? I just was interesting. What are actually your thoughts? I mean, what did you see back then, maybe, but also where do you see it now, and where do you see this going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I would zoom back in time, in being in 2017, I would have imagined 2025 of being completely dominated by device launches and syringes, and not people really thinking of vial a little bit more being a, let's say, clinical service dosage form, like a means to the end, and not really a commercial product that will actually be still dominating a market. I think one element could be the bumpy ride that you say is continuing challenges, and the industry remains very very scattered. So you need to work with a device partner and a packaging partner to the most part, a fill and finish partner. Maybe your formulation development is taking place elsewhere. So I think that you have a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and things may happen at the interface of these puzzles, being technical challenges, communication challenges, etc. But I would also say that, let's say, pharmaceutical industry is not necessarily famous for being fast adopters and early adopters in a lot of the technology. So it probably also speaks to being concerned from maybe management teams and leadership teams when it comes about these technologies, or being concerned about seeing some of the costs that are implied when you see devices are expensive. And I mean, we are not a device manufacturer, but that's where I would probably foresee that some of the considerations are there. Or I remember discussions when it's about supply chain, making changes to the supply chain. You basically have people in your typical workflows, infusion shares being handled, etc. And then going a different route to a patient then requires basically being brave and making that change and driving that change forward. So I think that's another consideration in my view.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, I also was specifically thinking about those large volume subcutaneous on-body injectors where really the uptake. I mean, again, it's like you kind of talk at those conferences, what shall be, and then I'm just surprised. And you just had some good points here why this is actually taking longer than we sometimes wish for.
And there's a lot of anxiety too. I mean, we are talking to quite a bunch of startup companies and talking to them about sub-Q administration. And to the most part, colleagues in clinical development still believe that you can only inject 1 milliliter subcutaneously. And that's where I think the discussion usually starts, saying, oh, can you really do more than one? And, how much can you really inject? And that's why I think I've been really grateful to see a lot of also, let's say, recent publications pushing the needle, I mean, literally, into maybe, being able to inject 10, maybe 20 milliliters subcutaneously, and even without permeation enhancers. And seeing that published in the public domain now is great, because it takes away that urban clinical myth of what is doable and what is not doable with pharmaceutical products. I think it really speaks to a lot of people being scared to actually try that.
Yeah, no, I can see it, but it's also kind of disruptors like you who will actually really drive this. But it always takes, interesting enough, longer than we think it should. Let's kind of switch gears. I mean, I have this one personal question here, and I, as I mentioned before with the introduction, I mean, you're also a professor, which is like I mean, we don't have that many in the industry, at least I'm not aware of it. So, I mean, if you could maybe share a little bit more about your journey and also how this ties into your work at 1023 Health.
Yeah. No, thank you, Matthias, for the question. Well, I did study pharmacy. I did make a PhD in toxicology, and then I changed gears to pharmaceutical sciences by joining Merck at that time, and then worked at Roche and Lonza. Moved to the CDMO space with that. Moved to Lonza, and then eventually started 1023. Now, I was always in pharmacy school. I was always interested by asking a lot of questions. Like I learned from a textbook, even what is an injectable, like what is an acceptable pH for injectables? And I learned from 2 textbooks, and they had different ranges. So that was the first time I thought I really need to challenge secondary literature and just don't believe everything that is written. And I was digging into the into the topic a little more, and then I thought actually none of the books were right, and it depends, and there was no primary literature on that, which really stimulated me to really ask questions in pharmacy and then try to research it. So that was always that research gene, also in industry, that was basically motivating me to look at these with interns and master students that I had in the team and stuff. The eventual decision to even do this so-called habilitation thesis, which is a German like big PhD and the qualification for professorship, was also interesting when I was at Merck at the time, and my boss at the time said to me, I completed all the trainings that existed. I think I was 24, and I couldn't believe it, and saying, no, I will not have completed my trainings. I'm 24. I got 40 years to go in industry, and it's hard to believe that I completed all the trainings that I could do. So because I still believe in lifelong learning. So and then he said, well, there's nothing I can offer you. And so I thought, well, it's actually a good idea to actually take the qualification of yourself into your own hands, and just don't wait for someone to offer you courses and everything. So I thought, running a professorship thesis is actually a good idea. And I also saw with a lot of friends in industry, there was always this continued reorganizations every 2 or 3 years in all major companies, which basically meant that half the stuff would be terminated, or a certain degree of stuff would be terminated. So I also thought I don't want to rely on and waiting for a termination and maybe a package to actually seal my fate, and I want to be in the position of being flexible and thinking about what I can do. So that was actually what led me to thinking about a habilitation and professorship thesis at the first place. So I'm still adjunct faculty to both Frankfurt University and Basel University, and I'm also overseeing, to a certain degree, PhD students. We do have 2 PhD students right now also at 1023 working here, who would then have basically, work in adjunct setups with the University of Frankfurt, respectively Basel, and I can support these PhD programs then accordingly. And side note, our chief scientific officer Andrea is also a professor. She's a professor at Freiburg University. So basically, we have a second person in 1023 who's done a professorship, and I think it's a good thing also if you're working in industry to make sure you stay true to the science and technical core of things, and you got to make sure that you follow the science, and science will determine on where the products will actually go.
Yeah, and I can see also it's probably great to really have you as somebody with industry experience, getting in front of students and talking to them and giving them feedback, etc. Hanns-Christian, we just talked a bit about projections before, and you were just saying like something like 40 years and stuff like that. So if I make a bold projection here, I said you're not gonna stop after 40 years. So we shall see, but I strongly doubt it.
Yeah, I cannot see myself being in pension as well.
Yeah. So in a certain way, I mean, now let's talk about 1023, which I think is very exciting. And I mean, it's always amazing to see like friends from the industry really doing something new and great things. And you have already grown so much. But how did that idea actually evolve? Was it like a single moment? Did you wake up in the morning and said, I'm starting a company? Or did it more like take shape over time?
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting story because I mean I've always been interested in building things. So also when I for example when I joined Roche and I joined a smaller team and the task was go build an organization around formulation development of biologics and then eventually moving more into biotech R&D on the Roche side at that point of time. And similarly as to when I joined Lonza, my task was go build a new business unit for sterile drug products and second task go build a culture, a team culture that actually can help to rejuvenate and have explore a little bit with modern management style. So I think the story of building organizations was kind of accompanying me throughout my professional journey. When I left Lonza, I was not very clear on what I would actually do. And I did have a more traditional job offer as well. I was then connected to our investors now at 1023 at 3i by a mutual friend who said, oh, and he actually said to me saying, oh, you left Lonza, you actually have to start a company. And I was actually telling him saying, well, I'm not sure. I mean, I was about around about turning 50 as well. Starting a company at 50 is maybe it's not the ideal time point in your life. It seems a little late, and I don't want to run around bootstrap and then beg for banks to give me like a few $1,000,000 and I to start that from scratch. And he was like, no, go talk to 3i, and it was actually interesting because it felt like more being a suggestion, even coming from the investor side and saying, well, you should actually start a company. And so it became more a conversation rather than a pivotal moment in time. And it was basically after I left my prior job and in that connection, and it was still during COVID. So it was basically, beginning of 2021, where I think a lot of us actually asked themselves about what's important in life, what's your purpose in life, what's your ikigai, why do you drive to an office every day instead of working remotely and spending time in your family, and all of that stuff was a very timely coincidence. I think thinking about what is important for me in the company, in the workplace, and I thought I was really intrigued about the idea we can start a company on the back of everything that I learned as a company, where I thought this is really good stuff and this is maybe stuff that I would like to do differently, and then basically build a company around that. And that's exactly how it formed. And it was also coincidental that I made a sustainability training with Cambridge, and I made a organizational development coach training with an organization in Berlin. So basically putting the pieces together of knowing what I'm good at technically, and a company that I can do in sterile product and combination product development and manufacturing, combined with maybe the motivation of driving an organization which is differently from how we organize, and having a very strong sustainability footprint and idea, and driving that forward. So that were kind of the three elements that came together in the beginning of 21.
No, this is great. I mean, my next question actually was a little bit something along the lines, because I understand from many folks in the industry that as a CEO, I mean, you spent a bigger part of your time really raising capital, but you have a really very interesting story you just shared with us. So this is great. Just another question. So obviously stuff always in LinkedIn, and this is now a few months back, but you obviously had like a grand opening on September 23. I mean, always a bit late, but on the other hand, you acquired Swisfillon, etc. So it makes sense. But tell us a little bit, how did that milestone actually feel? And what did it also symbolize to you and your team? It must have been a really great day for everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, as of today, 1023 is around about 3.5 years old. We launched the company in September 21, and as you said, we acquired the company Swisfillon at the time, which is meanwhile also renamed to 1023. And the acquisition was also 6 weeks after we launched the company, so that was a very interesting timeline, I would probably say. And even at that point of time, it was clear that there's one fill line, one fill facility that we have. with a focus on ready-to-use containers, so syringes and cartridges and vials in ready-to-use formats. And it was very clear that from a scale and capability perspective, we want to grow and we need to grow. And from what customers, but also the market basically needs. And that was a project we kicked off very early already in 2021 to have a separate facility with additional capacity, additional capabilities, and that on this grand opening, this facility, which we call Viva 2, Visp Valley 2, we basically have this, a larger scale version of the ready-to-use multi-dose filling line, multi-purpose filling line, very flexible filling for syringes, cartridges, vials, which is basically an 8x scale up of our existing line, plus pivoting into an additional technology for 1023, which is basically more standard bulk vials, also as a clinical service form, plus lyophilization with two 12.5 square meters. And then we also added a QC lab basically into the new building, which has been successfully inspected now in November as of last year. So that grand opening was really a huge moment of pride, of feeling, oh my gosh, it's been a journey that we kind of kicked off on day one. It's basically a greenfield or brownfield of adding 2 more sterile fill lines as an organic growth of a company which is not very old, adding QC lab. So I would probably say it was a great moment of pride, and it was a wonderful moment also for all the colleagues that basically attended the meeting. It was definitely one of the most memorable things to think of in 2024.
It's interesting. It was actually great. I wanted to also ask you a bit more about your core business, but I think you already kind of anticipated that question. It was interesting for people who like geography, is that my understanding is that Swiss Fillon, so a bigger part of the operation, is actually one of the probably most beautiful parts in Europe, if not the world. Like really in the middle of the Alps. Didn't quite make it yet. I like Basel too, but my understanding is it must be really, really amazing. When we look at your business, what would also interest me, who is actually your core customer? Maybe a typical customer. I mean, I'm sure you got also some that maybe you expanding services. And how do you actually tailor your services to meet like their unique needs? Because I'm pretty sure every customer is different.
No, great questions. Maybe just coming back a little bit to the core offerings at 1023 Health, we offer development, manufacturing, and testing services for sterile products. And I think, as an example, on the development side, so we do offer formulation development. We can service customers as early as supporting them in making a selection, for example, which antibody, which bispecific to choose from a developability formulation standpoint, etc. So like in a phase 0 candidate selection environment, then taking the stuff into development, we can develop analytical methods, and then take them to preclinical material, clinical material, and commercial material on the manufacturing side, plus then adding the related testing and QC services. So I would probably say we service a broad space, especially with that manufacturing, development, and testing. And I think we're kind of uniquely positioned because in many places you see formulation CROs, you see different fill and finish organizations, and then you see different QC testing organizations. I truly believe that magic actually happens at these interfaces. So it's very important to know, the primary packaging the formulation will go into. It needs to be considered in the development. You need to know how to produce it, how basically the testing actually and the control strategy is set up, because it totally links to the development and manufacturing. So that's why I believe these 3 pillars help us a lot. And as you rightfully said, we have spread these 3 activities around our 2 locations in Visp, Valais, and in Basel, both in Switzerland. And I think both places are beautiful. Basel with swimming in the Rhine in the summer place, and in Visp it's like an hour, typically a great a place that many people would know would be Zermatt, so which is an hour from the site, and it's everyone going to Zermatt would actually pass our new location as well, just on both by train and the highway, and so that's a little bit our core business, our uniqueness, and this is where customers, I think, also look at us, is exactly that combination of development, manufacturing, and testing services. So someone who needs a more comprehensive and holistic approach to the services. At the same time, we also have customers just leveraging us for development services for individual studies, for development, in-use compatibility, dilution schemes, for formulation studies, or just for the manufacturing pieces, or just for the testing. And that's where I think we're also pretty flexible on how to address customers' needs. On the formulation side, we do have quite a bit of expertise and programs who are going to sub-Q or intravitreal. So speak about the typical high concentration, high viscosity kind of programs, which is kind of a unique approach. And then on the filling side, also, as I mentioned, the filling of syringes and cartridges, we're also pretty unique because we have quite some elaborate process controls and process designs about what we do. We can handle novel containers. We can fill polymer containers. We can fill 0.1 milliliter with a 2% precision, which is kind of unheard of. No air bubbles, and I think all these features actually allow quite well integration with devices where, imagine when you don't have an air bubble, you don't need priming. Or you don't lose, have a lot of risk when you down-dose these for intravitreal and, things like that. Or you don't have risks for CCI and air transport and all of that. And that's where I think customers actually seek us out for that specialty knowledge and specialty capabilities. And our customers hence also range from, startups that are in a academic state and haven't even defined their name, and spinning off to customers in seed funding, Series A, more medium-sized pharma we work for, but also for top 10 pharma. So we have a range of top 10 pharmas that we're currently supporting, which is also filling me with great pride, because it basically also means that top pharma companies considers a company at the size of 1023 still being a competent partner. And I think we are currently 210 people in the organization. So I would say we are still a fairly small organization, although I would say for a 3-year-old, quite organically grown company, I think it's still quite sizable.
It was actually quite impressive. I mean, when you mentioned your uniqueness, I was actually thinking along the lines, okay, what are kind of core customers? But it seems to me that with what you guys are doing, I mean, you can really, as you said, I mean, serve the whole range of like pharmaceutical companies. And of course, I mean, you also like work obviously with device, primary container partners, etc. So if we want to look ahead and also kind of getting to closure here. So where would you see 1023 Health moving in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? And what will also key partners play in shaping that kind of successful journey?
So maybe also to the partnerships, and you said it rightfully, I think there's a range of, and I truly believe that in partnerships and collaborations, and I also think that the traditional way of thinking about competition is probably a little bit obsolete. So I think it's a little bit more thinking about synergies and what people can work collaboratively for the benefit of joint customers, but eventually patients in the end. We have had a couple of announcements on collaborations. We've been collaborating for a range of years, filling the West SmartDose container. We've been just announcing a collaboration with BD on the RFID tagged prefilled syringe implementation. We've been working with SHL. We are currently supporting the filling and assembly of the Ipsodose OBI. So just speaking of OBIs, because as you also mentioned that, there's a range of partnerships which are obviously very important, and I'm also looking forward and hoping for more closer collaboration with Kymanox, obviously. And I think that's where I think the future will hopefully see more partnerships across the industry, and people being less scared of, working together. I'm hoping for hence breaking down silos and connecting the pieces of the puzzle that I mentioned initially, is to make sure that there's no separations on this thinking with primary packaging and device and formulation and filling on the other side. I think we can help bridge that. I'm not a big fan of jumping on specific trends necessarily. So I hope we can help to innovate and break down, let's say, urban myths. When I just mentioned this injection volumes discussions, I think there's plenty of urban myths and sterile product development. I think people need to get more creative. I think we can help to actually provide agility and flexibility on that end, and that's why I think we will be kept busy in the years to come, very, very clearly.
Well, this is great. Notice that you definitely have a good vision here, and again, kudos to you and your team. It's actually always quite amazing. To see like a totally new business emerge and really providing value to so many people in the industry. And again, it's going to be fun again. I think now being in 2025, meeting with you, your team, other peers at all those conferences, and then continue that conversation. Unfortunately, I think we're run out of time. So I really hope people enjoyed listening to the podcast. Hanns-Christian, a special thank you for you sharing those insights with us. It was really great. And also wishing you a lot of success moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and looking forward to see you at the next conference, Mathias.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Life Science Solutions presented by Kymanox. A big thank you to today's guest, Hanns-Christian Mahler, for sharing his insights on innovation, challenges, and the evolution of our industry. For more information on 1023 Health, visit ten23.health. That's TEN23.health. And for more information on Kymanox, visit Kymanox.com. This episode was edited and produced by Earfluence. Until next time, this is Life Science Solutions, where challenges meet innovation.